Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Marche, the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. Before we introduce our guests and get started, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own and however true, funny, or interesting are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. Well, we are thrilled to bring you this educational presentation. Attendees are muted, but we encourage you to ask questions using the chat box, and the presenter will answer those queries after the webinar today during our question and answer session. If you ask a question in the chat box and we don't have a chance to get to it, go ahead and leave your phone number as well. We will make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event to address that question. Once again, we want this experience to be as educational as possible. Please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. We have an amazing speaker today who I was just saying has encyclopedic knowledge about this subject. So we're really lucky to have her here. I'd love to introduce you to today's moderator. Robin Wolcott is a financial advisor with Warner Group and LPL investment advisor representative who offers attention to detail and strong focus on relationships and collaboration as she helps clients plan for their current and future lives. She holds her Series 7 and Series 66 registration with LPL Financial. Prior to joining the Warner Group, Robin's career was in media, which culminated with her role as a publisher of a Connecticut Shoreline newspaper group. Robin lives in the Connecticut Shoreline with her husband and their daughter. And Robin, why don't you go ahead and just say hello so we can see your face on the video.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're here, and I'm happy to be here with Anna Lee.
Excellent. Well, I would love to introduce you to today's speaker. Those of you who have been attended some of our webinars in the past may know that Anna Lee is one of our featured guests frequently, and we have almost a library of information with Anna Lee. And I want to encourage you, if this is a topic that's important to you, that we do have several other webinars with Anna Lee caring about various aspects of this topic. So Anna Lee Kruger is the founder and president of CareRight Inc., the concierge of senior care planning. CareRight assists families in navigating the complexities associated with the aging process by managing crisis situations, developing a proactive aging plan, facilitating family meetings, and providing needed support to struggling caregivers. For Anna Lee, providing proactive senior care planning to families is more than just a career. It's her passion. Anna Lee has spent her entire 27-year career in the senior care industry and has become a nationally recognized expert in the field of senior care planning. Anna Lee is the author of The Invisible Patient, which is launching in about a week, correct, Anna Lee?
Yes.
And this book outlines the emotional, physical, and financial toll experienced by family caregivers. And congratulations on the book. And I'm just going to go ahead and stop the share and turn the time over to you.
All right. Very good. Thank you so much. And thank you, Robin, for moderating our webinar today. All right. I always hold my breath when I push buttons on a live Zoom. Okay. We're good. All right. So everyone, my name is Anna Lee Kruger. I am the owner of CareRight Incorporated and the co-founder of Plan for Life Now. Today, we're going to talk about living with an aging loved one. Oh boy, the arrows aren't working. Let me see. Oh, here we go. Let's try this. Okay, there we go. Why this is such an important topic, aging in general is such an important topic for me is because working in long-term care and continuing care retirement communities or CCRCs for 18 years, every day I had families in my office because there was a medical crisis. Mom's in the hospital says, here's a list of facilities, go find one by noon tomorrow because we're discharging your mom. And families just don't have these types of conversations about the what ifs of aging. And so the tour would take about an hour, but I was spending 2 and 3 hours at a time with each family because there was family dynamics at play where, well, mom wasn't a great mother and here I am having to make decisions for her, or I haven't talked to mom for 1.5 years because we live in California and she lives in Connecticut, for example. What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to make decisions for her? And a lot of families have made the promise. Well, I promised that I would never put her in a nursing home and here I am. So a lot of families also didn't know, well, is there a living will in place, power of attorney, long-term care insurance? And again, answers were always, I don't know. We never talked about stuff like that. So in 2011, I was like, there's got to be a better way. Let's try to do some proactive family conversations and family meetings and talk about the what ifs. That said, despite my best efforts at doing literally hundreds of podcasts and hundreds of speaking engagements and hundreds of webinars a year, families still come to me in crisis rather than proactive planning. You can imagine that if you wait until you're in crisis mode, you'll have options for care, but they're not going to be as good of options as if you actually had a proactive aging plan so that you understand different levels of care, caregiver burnout, like what we're going to be talking about today, and what care options you have versus always just making a knee-jerk reaction with care decisions and then hoping for the best. So I thought that this time of year, as holiday season approaches, it would be prudent to have this topic because there's a lot of times where families only see each other at Thanksgiving or holiday or Christmas time, and they're totally taken aback at how mom and dad don't look like they're doing very well. They've lost weight, they're depressed, they have more memory impairment. So we're going to talk today about living with an aging loved one and what to kind of look for around holiday season, but also safeguarding you as family members from making that knee-jerk reaction of, oh my gosh, mom's not doing well, let's just move her in with us, because that can go well and it cannot go well. So we're going to talk about the pros and cons of that today. So without further ado, living with an aging loved one. We know that 40% of family caregivers report that their care recipients live with them multiple generations in one household. Could be an okay thing or a positive thing if there's enough space and privacy. Space and privacy are two of many things that families just don't think about when you move an elderly person in your home. Other factors, respect for one another. Maybe there's always been family dynamics at play and you didn't have the closest relationship and here you are living together and it may not be going very well. Clear communication. If there is one takeaway from today's topic, you have to, I am telling you, you have to learn how to communicate as a family. I am here to tell you that 92% of my clients come to me in crisis because they don't have a plan in place and now dad's dementia has progressed and the kids don't know what to do. And the kids haven't maybe necessarily done the best job of communicating with each other about, okay, well, what are we going to do for dad? So clear communication, if there's one takeaway, I hope it's this. You have to, as a family, learn how to move beyond any past hurts, pains, anger issues, family junk that gets often thrown into the mix of aging. And you need to learn how to communicate with each other as a family and work together as a team as much as possible. I'm also here to tell you 85% of my clients come to me, their relationships are so strained that they simply just can't communicate well on their own. And that's why they have me as a neutral third party person facilitate these conversations and put a plan together. Setting boundaries is really important, because you also have to have that conversation of, okay, mom and dad, it's great that we can all live together, but if your care needs exceed my comfort level or interfere with my job or my career or my own family, then this isn't going to work anymore. So having this communication with each other before you get that bedroom set up for mom or dad or both. Majority of families make the move without considering the what ifs. So I just went over some of the what ifs. They don't think about, well, what are we going to do when dad's dementia progresses and he's in our bedroom in the middle of the night because he has his days and nights mixed up, for example. So obviously I'm always going to promote a proactive aging plan is crucial if living together is going to be successful. And if you want to have positive aging experience as a family and as your mom and dad age, you have to have a plan together, especially right now with our healthcare crisis, with massive nationwide shortages of healthcare workers. They are leaving the industry. Home care companies are having a hard time staffing clients to be able to stay at home because they don't have the caregivers. I mean, the time of being able to call up a facility or a home care company and say, hey, I need care to start on Tuesday, those days are gone, and it's not going to come back for maybe ever. So now with COVID and the fallout of staffing and healthcare, now you have to have a plan if you want to have any possible positive outcomes at all. The pros of living together. Convenience of being down the hall from one another is a lot easier in some ways than having to drive 3 hours to go see if mom is taking her pills, right? So convenience of being down the hall from one another. Better advocate, because you can oversee the caregivers. Again, if the home care companies can provide the caregivers, you really will find, if you haven't been in the healthcare setting before, you will find that now more than ever, you will have to be a strong advocate for your loved one. Better sense of what is going on, your loved one's abilities, their cognition, their nutritional intake, their bathroom habits, their medication oversight, if they're falling, if they have mood issues like depression or anxiety, and also their driving abilities. So when they live with you or you live with them, you know what's going on in that day-to-day interaction, and you know what their abilities are. And that's really, really important, because we also want to make sure that as a family member who will end up being thrust into that role of family caregiver, we need to make sure that we safeguard you as the family caregiver and go through, like, what do you want to keep on your caregiver plate, so to speak, and what do you want to take off? Maybe you're the daughter and you don't want to give your dad a bath or change his Depends or those kind of things. So you want to go through what you currently do as a caregiver and decide what do you want to keep on your plate and what do you want to outsource to maybe a home care company if they can find a caregiver. You also have a sense of giving back. Like a lot of us that came from healthy families growing up and healthy, emotionally healthy parents, like we do have the sense of giving back because they provided us a loving environment, a loving, fun childhood, and caregiving to an older adult can kind of give you that sense of, now it's my turn to take care of you. That said, that doesn't mean that it's always feasible. And that doesn't mean that you may have the family relationship that other families do. Every family presents with its own uniqueness, so to speak. The cons, most families make the move without ever having a family meeting about the what ifs or plan around the typical progression of aging. It's fun to have mom live with you when she's still, in her 70s and she's playing tennis and she's golfing and she's getting together with her little lady friends every week, and she still drives and she can still take herself to the bathroom and she doesn't have a lot of pain and she doesn't have any memory impairment, right? That can still be fun because you're like, oh, this is fun. But what about the typical progression of aging, like when your mom's dementia progresses and she's up and down all night long and she's incontinent and she's smearing BM on your walls, or your dad lives with you and he's not able to hit the toilet? These are real life things that happen that kids just simply don't think about. And when your house starts to look and smell like a nursing home, it becomes less of a viable solution of living together. But if you've never had that family meeting to talk about the what ifs, and you don't have an exit strategy in place, then you end up with, like, what happens to thousands and thousands of family members is they just kind of suck it up, so to speak, because they're like, oh, well, now I feel too guilty about having mom go into a facility. Or now, because there's a pandemic and you may or may not ever see your loved one again if the facility goes on shutdown, now there's a lot more variables that you have to think about. So I can't stress enough, like, the what ifs of aging. Adjusting to having an elderly loved one in your home. I can vouch for this. My dad lives with me in the winter months because he doesn't want to do the Iowa winters up there, right? And I live in Florida. And there was definitely an adjustment phase. You know, I'm really lucky because my dad drives, he gets himself to the bathroom, he's really active, he rides his exercise bike all around our subdivision, but he didn't wear his hearing aids for many months. And that was a wedge in our relationship. So these are just some things that you need to think about, you know. And I have a dog and he wasn't used to having a dog in the house, you know, so there's just things that take time to adjust, but you have to communicate it. You have to talk it out, you know. And like, I have hardwood floors all over my house. So even though his bedroom is actually on the other side of this wall of my office, every little thing he says or does, I can hear in my half of the house. And so these are just real life things that you need to be thinking about, is what kinds of troubleshooting can you do before you end up with a conflicted relationship. Family relationships and family dynamics. Not every family, like I said before, has a relationship to be able to, in a healthy way, live together. Right? If you've always been feuding, or someone has mental health issues and they're unstable with their medications, for example, or they've been abusive and you are a survivor of childhood trauma from an abusive parent, you know, those things come into play, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, to live together and have that be a safe, healthy situation for everybody. So what is the plan if or when? So say mom has dementia and her dementia progresses and your loved one's mood, behavior, personality, and care needs change, because that is exactly what will happen as that dementia progresses. So normally dementia is a slow, gradual decline, but that's not always the case. It depends on what kind of dementia your loved one may have. And also if your loved one ends up with some sort of trauma. For example, my mom had dementia as well. She was doing really well until she fell and she broke her shoulder. She was in the hospital for 2.5 weeks, and rehab and all that, what we call environmental delirium, progressed her, and the trauma progressed her into that next stage of dementia where we just simply couldn't take care of her needs anymore. So if you have a loved one with dementia, it is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when that disease progresses. You have to have a plan in place. Incontinence, bowel or bladder, and your home starts to smell, like I talked about a couple slides ago. You know, people don't think about having mom or dad stay with them when it's still fun and they're able-bodied. But when they lose their license and you're now taking time off work, to get them to their doctor's appointments, which truly can take all day, it starts to be problematic. Safety, falls, disease progression. Say your house isn't set up for an elderly person. Say you have stairs, or you know, your your deck doesn't have safe wood in it because you were always going to replace the wood, but you never did. And that's dad's favorite place to go. And now he's going to fall through the deck. So there's just a lot of things you have to think about. Do you have a basement? Is your washer and dryer in the basement? Is your mom or dad going to try to do those basement stairs carrying a load of laundry? And are they at risk of falling? So what's your plan if they are starting to fall? You can only safeguard your house so much and still have it be a livable thing for you and your family, right? So when we start talking about your house starting to look like a nursing home, when you've got commodes in your living room, or you've got walkers and you've got ramps and you've got all shower chairs, and every time you want to use the bathroom, you got to move the shower chair or move the toilet riser. I mean, these are real life things that people, I'm telling you, they just don't think about until it happens to them, and then they're stuck. So I'm trying to help prevent some icky things coming down the pike. What is the plan if and when you're taking time off work for doctor's appointments and caregiving? I can tell you, people don't understand how much time and energy is involved in being a family caregiver. And like I said, one doctor appointment can take all day. Why? Because as your loved one becomes more frail and loses some mobility, you can't just zip, zip, zip through your normal day, right? You got to get her. If she's progressed to the point where you need to help her get up and ready for the day and get her showered and dressed, and now she needs her meds, and she needs breakfast, and now she has to go to the bathroom again. And then you've got to get her to the doctor's appointment, and it takes 20 minutes to get her in the car because you have to load the wheelchair or the walker, or she has arthritis and she just moves very slowly. You can't just zip through things. Then you've got to drop her off and get her ready in the doctor's office, right? And wait there, because I don't know where you all might be, but a lot of these doctor's offices, they're an hour to 2 hours behind because they have so much volume. They overbook their day. So then that's another time that you're spending in the waiting room, and she has to go to the bathroom again. You finally get in to see the doctor, and the doctor changes the medications. So now when you get done at the office, you have to go to the pharmacy. So you see how this all goes? Like, it takes all day, because then when you finally do get back home, she's got to go to the bathroom again and maybe get her ready for a nap. Or showered if she had an incontinence episode, but now you also have to refill her pill trays, right? If she's not able to take care of her medication on her own. So one appointment can truly take all day. Spouses are supportive usually initially, but after caregiving starts impacting your marriage or your relationship or your partnership or your own family, then you have a double whammy, because you're in over your head as a family caregiver to your aging parent, but you also have the stress of a spouse saying, you never have energy or time for us, and don't we count too? And you might also be trying to juggle a career. So do you see how this can get very overwhelming very quickly, and why it's important that you have to have an aging plan, and we have to talk about the what ifs of aging, because it will happen. So doesn't it make more sense to be prepared for that? We already talked about the stairs and the bathroom safety and just all the equipment that elderly people tend to have, the toilet risers, the shower chairs, the grab bars. So again, that's what I'm talking about. When your house starts looking like a facility or a hospital, then it becomes less fun, right? Your spouse decides not having your loved one in your home is not working, or you have little kids. You're a sandwich generation, which is a lot of our family caregivers. So you have young kids still at home, and your mom and dad, there tends to be a certain kind of time in people's lives as they age where they love to be around little kids for short periods of time. But if your loved one lives with you and your little kids are like running around and, playing and making noise like kids do and should, but your parents are always like, Stanley, be quiet. You're making, I know, Stanley, I came up with that real quick. Stanley, you're making too much noise. Be quiet. I'm trying to take a nap, or I'm listening to Wheel of Fortune or whatever. So there tends to be that riff as well. So these are things the reason they made the slide is because these are very important things that families just simply don't think about. And you wouldn't, because you're in uncharted territory. Your loved one's pet doesn't get along with your pet. So there's a lot of families, a lot of seniors have their own pet, or maybe you're allergic to their pet, or your loved one is allergic to your pet. So pets can be a problem if you don't have a solution worked out. And why should poor little Fluffy have to suffer because we didn't think about Fluffy, right? Because Fluffy matters. Fluffy helps prevent depression and anxiety with elderly people. So we have to consider their pet. Privacy issues, again, young kids coming in and out of your loved one's room. That's my dog. That's one of the reasons Dad doesn't wear his hearing aids, because when my dog barks, it is loud. So your loved ones, your young kids coming in and out of your loved one's room, not giving them the privacy that they need, or your loved one who may have dementia wanders into your room or into the bathroom. Cons, hard of hearing, not wearing hearing aids. These are things you need to talk about. These are things that truly, I'm telling you, will impact your day-to-day living. Like, for example, I work from home every day. I've been virtual with families across the country since 2012, right? So I work from home on Zoom every day, meeting with families all across the country, talking about all of these types of aging issues, putting aging plans in place. But what can they hear? Andy Griffith, right? Because Dad doesn't have his hearing aids in, and his bedroom is right next to my office. So these are things that really can impact your day-to-day living. Eating habits, maybe they're noisy, they chew with their mouth open, or they're just messy because sometimes as we age, we don't have hand dexterity to hold silverware very well, and so we spill, or they spill. Or maybe they're a picky eater and they don't want to eat what you made for the rest of the family. Or maybe your parent or parents are on special diets because they had a stroke, so they have to have pureed food or a mechanical soft diet, or they can't have regular can't have regular liquids, they have to have thickened liquids. And what if your little kid who doesn't understand thickened liquids to prevent choking gives grandma a regular glass of Diet Coke and she chokes? So these are important things. Caregiver relief. Who will provide relief so that you don't get burned out as a caregiver? Again, the critical part of having family meetings is, I'll take mom and dad in, that's fine. And here's where my boundaries are. Mom and dad can stay with me until this, and this happen, and it's no longer feasible, or it impacts my marriage, my career, my finances, my relationships with my friends. I can't have my friends over because mom is demented and she says inappropriate things, or my dad has dementia and he keeps disrobing, because that is another thing that happens in the later stages of dementia. So the caregiver gets really burned out because it's a 24/7 job. And we all go into this pretty noble thinking, oh, I got this, I can take care of mom and dad. But I'm telling you, very quickly, you can get overwhelmed, and most families, most adult kids think that their parents are doing better than they really are until they start spending more time together, or until they live together. And then they're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I'm going to need some relief. So again, the communication piece, where I said at the top of the webinar, if you have one takeaway from this webinar, it's about communicate, and improve those communications with your family and your sister who might live, maybe you have 4 siblings and they all live in different states. You have to communicate. And if you're not able to work out a caregiver relief plan and say, you know what, my sister Rebecca is going to come every other month and stay for a couple of weeks so that I can get away for a vacation. That's the ideal scenario, is that you can work together as a family and offer that relief. Your siblings, communication, I can't stress that enough. Communicating your needs for caregiver relief and developing a caregiver plan, combination of family members and or professional caregivers. Like I've told you, I've got clients that their families didn't have a plan, and so there's home care companies that just simply can't staff these shifts. And so the families are having to step in and even do more when they're already burned out. The problem is, number one, that COVID has burned a lot of families out already, because if they were isolating together, they're like, oh my gosh, now I can finally get out and I can get back to work. But now that they can't find caregivers, now you don't get to, easily do that anymore. So you've got to put a plan together, especially if now you are starting to get back into the office. Who's going to take care of mom while you're at work? Out of town or state siblings think they are helping when they visit and give you a list of ideas and suggestions or make changes to systems that you have in place. This is probably at least 15 times a week that I get this complaint from the local, the primary caregiver who's the son or the daughter that lives locally with mom and dad. And then while they want to see their siblings, they're also dreading the aftermath because they know that when Sister Rebecca flies in from Nashville, she's going to come with good intentions of having all these like, oh, well, have you thought of this and this and this, or have you tried this, or, and then you as the primary caregiver is just like gritting your teeth because you're like, oh, yes, I've thought of that. No, it doesn't work. So they're trying to help. But again, that communication piece is critical. Most families aren't able to have these types of conversations on their own and have it be a healthy, productive conversation. So again, that's the value of a neutral third party person facilitating your family meetings so that we can actually talk through the good, the bad, and the ugly. And depending on what your loved one's financial situation is, what can they afford? Like what's their care budget? So we can put that aging plan together so that you don't get burned out. Communicating the day-to-day issues you deal with. Incontinence, mom and dad are having accidents in their pants and then they're sitting on my couch and now my couch smells of urine. Or I come home from work, I work 12-hour days and mom's been incontinent all day long. And so first thing I smell when I come in is urine. So these are things I know people are like, oh, we don't want to talk about this, but you know what? You'll be forced into it if you don't do it proactively. Falls, confusion, dementia progression, behavior, mood and personality changes, time spent caregiving, time spent away from work, missed vacations due to caregiving responsibilities, and stress on your immediate family. These are things that you need to communicate, whether you set up a family Dropbox account and you can communicate like dad had this doctor's appointment, he's getting physical therapy, this is what they're doing, or you have a family Facebook private page where you can send updates and say, hey, I have to be out of town for 2 weeks in November for work. Who can come and stay with dad while I'm out, while I'm traveling for work? You really do need to learn to communicate if you aren't already. And understanding dementia and the chronic diseases. More often than not, families, because most of my clients have dementia, and that's one of the reasons the family is reaching out to me is because they don't understand why mom is acting the way she is. They don't understand really what they've gotten themselves into as a family caregiver, and that's why they're burned out and need to put a plan together. But really taking time to understand what dementia is, and so that you have an idea of what you're getting yourself and your loved one into as far as a situation that may not be feasible for very long. Cons of living together, bills and finances. I can't tell you how many families I work with that, well, they haven't had any conversations at all, let alone about bills and finances, because these are topics that people get all like weird about, right? So cons are bills and finances. Have it in writing. Who's going to pay which bills? Well, dad and mom are going to pay food and electric and cable, and we'll make the mortgage payment. You have to, it's just like a roommate agreement. You have to figure out who's doing what. I encourage families to keep a spreadsheet of the money that you spend on household expenses. And why do you think that is? I'll tell you why. It's because I can't tell you how many families will say, well, why should she get more inheritance than I do? I'm just as much of a loving daughter as Sally was. Well, Sally was the primary caregiver. And if Sally can pull up the spreadsheet and say, yeah, well, I spent this much time each week at doctor's appointments, this much of our own money supporting mom because she needed a new something or another. Keeping a spreadsheet and run it like a business so that there's no confusion on what's been spent and who's been doing what. Especially, you don't want to have those relationships fall apart after mom passes away. Keep a spreadsheet of the time you spend caregiving. The average caregiver spends 22 hours per week, and that's while your parents are still doing well. A lot of my daughters call me, my clients' daughters call me, they are the power of attorney or caregiver to multiple aging loved ones. They've got mom, they've got dad, they've got stepmom, stepdad, maybe their in-laws who maybe they liked or they don't like. And now they're like, oh, Sally can take care of them. She takes care of all these other elderly relatives. Well, I'm telling you, this isn't like Thanksgiving. There isn't always room for one more person to have to take care of. When my parents came down to spend winter with me a couple years ago, right before COVID, my mom was still able to obviously travel even with her dementia, but unfortunately 2 weeks after they got here, my mom fell, she broke her shoulder, and that's what caused a whole spiral of progression, disease progression. And unfortunately, the night that I was admitting my mom into, my dad and I were admitting mom into rehab because she discharged from the hospital and needed to go to rehab for shoulder for therapy. My dad had a stroke. And so I was juggling between mom's needs at this new rehab center, being with dementia, and in another new environment. She was very, very confused, very scared, very disoriented. I've got my dad in this other hospital because he just had a stroke, because mom had all these, when you get discharged from a hospital, you have like 17 pages of discharge instructions, and she had like 16 doctor's appointments, which were all like urgent to be seen because she ended up with a catheter, and you have to see some of these specialists within a certain time frame. And so I mean, my point is that it gets very overwhelming very quickly. And then dad in the hospital with his stroke, when he got discharged, he also had 17 pages of multiple doctor's appointments, a cardiologist, a kidney specialist. Yeah. So it gets very overwhelming. And when you're one person trying to juggle all of this in your career during a pandemic, it's incredibly difficult. So it's important to keep a spreadsheet of everything that you do, time spent, money spent, because it's just important to have that taken care of and documented. Review with your siblings quarterly so no one can claim they didn't realize the time and money you spend caregiving, but it's also an opportunity for you guys to say, look, dad's dementia is progressing. If you want to have quality visits with him, you better come now, because as he loses ground with his memory impairment, he's not going to be able to have meaningful conversations. So if there's things you need to clear the air and get off your chest, you need to do that while they're still competent and verbal. Health changes, declines, and scares. Care needs exceed your abilities, your tolerance, and your patience levels. Not everybody is wired to be a caregiver. Not everybody has that personality, and you think that you can do it, temporarily, but then you realize, oh my gosh, mom's needs are much bigger than what I'm able to do. And so what's your plan? Who's going to help you? Who's going to be that support system that you're going to need? And again, I can't stress this enough because this comes up literally many, many, many times a week. Your home starts looking and smelling like a nursing home, medical equipment, oxygen concentrators, wheelchairs, walkers, commodes, Hoyer lifts, incontinence supplies. Like, I have a whole living room full of pads, gloves, and bottom wipes from my mom. So I mean, this is when your house starts looking like that, because you need to stock up on some of this, especially during a pandemic. It might change your relationship and how you view how much longer you can do family caregiving. Furniture ruined by incontinence. All right. What to do if it doesn't work out? Communicate and be honest and say, look, that's why I say have these family meetings quarterly, so that it's not like anyone's being blindsided about, well, dad's disease has really progressed. I just can't manage him anymore. If you have been communicating all along, then there's no reason anyone can be blindsided. But if you communicate and say, look, this isn't working out. I don't know what more I can do to help you. We need to figure out a plan. You have to be honest and say, I love you guys, but I'm in uncharted territory here, and I don't know what the best route to go is. So we need help figuring this out. We need to have an aging plan in place. Hopefully you've already held the family meetings throughout and have had some open dialogue about an exit strategy. I can tell you that a lot of families make a mistake of bouncing their loved ones, their parents, from sibling to sibling. And that just isn't healthy either, because then you don't have continuity of physician care, unless you all live like right next to each other. But especially if they have memory impairment, that's just harmful. That's just harmful, because they already are struggling trying to figure out their environment, and then to just keep bouncing them around is just really unfair to them. So you've got to be thinking about an aging plan, again, preferably proactive, for when living together does not work out, because it rarely works out long term. Because eventually, unless you're a doctor or you're a nurse, and this is how you want to spend your evenings when you get off work, or retire early to be a caregiver, it just doesn't work out long term. Either way, you're going to have an aging plan. Loved one has to financially, cognitively, and physically qualify for care centers. So if your mom or dad have, $500,000 to their name, what is their care budget? And that's what we help families figure out, along with their financial planner. I use a collaborative approach, because then our clients have the best possible outcomes. So what is the actual care budget, and how can we leverage that so that you get the best quality of care with what you have to work with? Obviously, the more resources you have, the more options you have. That's just how life is. If you have $5 million to spend, that's a whole lot different than someone who's age 71, has early onset dementia, and is going to need care the rest of their life at $6,000 to $7,000 a month. If they go into a memory care facility. If they try to stay home and have 24-hour care, that could be anywhere from $9,000 to $10,000 a month. So you need to figure out, what is the care budget? Where are they financially? Is there anything you can leverage, like VA benefits or long-term care insurance or life insurance, hybrids that have, potentially long-term care rider. So these are things that families don't think about. And so they end up spending a lot more money because they don't know what they don't know. So it makes sense to work with a professional who does this for a living. We've got healthcare worker shortages due to COVID, and this includes home care. There's home care companies that I obviously work with, and they've got 30 to 40 seniors at home that need 20 to 25 hours of home care a week, and they can't find caregivers to do it. So guess who's doing it? Families. So again, think about what relationship you have with your parents. How do you want to be spending your time? How supportive is your spouse and the rest of your family? What conversations have you had with your siblings about, what are we going to do with mom and dad when they need more care? The waiting lists for quality care communities can be pretty long. There's care communities that have 2 to 3 year waiting lists. So you have to be prepared if you want to have a proper aging journey. The other thing too, just to go back on one of the topics on that slide, is you have to physically qualify, you have to cognitively qualify, and financially qualify to move into care communities. Like, you have to pass their tests, right? It's not the Marriott. You can't say, oh, well, there's an assisted living down the street from me, I'm just going to call them up and that's where mom's going to go. No, that's not how this works at all. So you have to financially qualify, physically qualify, and cognitively qualify. And each level of care has different licensures for how sick you can be and still stay there. So for example, in Florida, assisted living, if you can't stand and pivot transfer, or you need 2 people to help you get from point A to point B, you no longer qualify for assisted living level of care. So these are things families just don't know. And so they make terrible, terrible mistakes because they're trying to figure this out on their own, and it just doesn't work. Or their parent is stubborn or strong-willed and wants to age in place at home, but now they've burned through all their assets on home care, and now they only qualify for Medicaid, and Medicaid doesn't pay 100% of the fee to be able to stay at home, right? Like, you have to go into a nursing home, and how easy do you think that is to go straight from home to a nursing home, and especially finding a nursing home that will accept you when you have no money? So we've got clients that Their kids have to drive 4 and 5 hours one way just because that's where there was a nursing home that had an open bed. So these are real life things that you really need to be thinking about. And if you're scared or this piques your interest, you might want to reach out and schedule a call. Common mistakes: never holding a family meeting to discuss the what ifs of aging, and not having an aging plan in place. Not discussing budget, who will pay for what, and need to keep a spreadsheet and have a contractor or agreement in place. Not discussing an exit strategy for when living together is no longer feasible. You can live here until the house starts smelling of urine, or starts looking like a nursing home with the wheelchairs, the toilet risers, the shower chairs. And I'm here to tell you, their conditions can change quickly, like overnight. Like a urinary tract infection, most adult kids who have taken on the responsibility of their aging parents are completely ill-equipped. They don't know what signs of a urinary tract infection are. And their parents are going septic and in the hospital because they simply didn't understand the simple things of a urinary tract infection, the signs and symptoms of a urinary tract infection, or they didn't understand dementia progression. And now they're completely burned out and their parent is unsafe while their kids are at work. Not considering or discussing the day-to-day routines, ensuring privacy for all, the little kids not barging in on grandparents, wearing of hearing aids so the TV isn't a gazillion, you can tell I wrote the content, so the TV isn't a gazillion decibels, personality traits or behavioral traits that may be annoying. Addressing conflict right away is so critical versus waiting until it builds up and resentment sets in, because then do you really think you're going to have a emotional free productive family meeting? No. And that's why when we facilitate family meetings, it is productive because we don't have any of that emotional junk that gets brought up. I lead these family meetings like a compassionate business meeting and tell me what's going on and let's put a plan together. Not having a grab and go binder is a huge mistake. So, or some solution that works for you. This is the grab and go binder. It's truly it's a 3-ring binder with 11 tabs, all things insurance, accounts, passwords, assets. If you're a business owner, all of your subscriptions and your payroll processing company, it's really about getting everything in order and making sure things are buttoned up. A lot of my clients don't have their estate documents in order, so they don't even have a decision maker named, and dad just had a major stroke. So guess what they have to do? They have to go through guardianship court, and that's thousands of dollars simply because the other professionals that they might be working with never took the initiative to say, this is important. You have to get your estate documents done. So those are important things, because when there's a medical crisis, that's the last time, that's the last, you don't want to be having to make major decisions and learn all this stuff at the peak time of a medical crisis. You need to be in decision-making mode already. The invisible patient, I'm so excited. This has been a labor of love and hate, I have to say. I've literally spent, I can't even tell you how many hours working on this book. I can tell you that it is 28 years of my knowledge in a book. There's scripts for family meetings, there's checklists, there's how to interview home care companies, there is how to advocate for your aging loved one. And I'm here to tell you that if you have an aging relative in a healthcare setting of any kind, whether it's hospital or nursing home, you need to learn how to advocate for them. I have a patient advocacy division of my business of Care Right, and you'd be mortified of what's happening in some of these facilities because they're all short-staffed, and they're leaving residents in bed all day long because they don't have staff to get them up and get them changed. They're putting 2 and 3 depends on them, and leaving them in bed all day in a lot of these care communities right now. Another major change that your financial advisor probably may or may not know, but a lot of these facilities, because they have no staff or are short-staffed, they're actually having residents pay private duty. So having companions, private duty. So that's another $8,500 per month that they're spending on top of the room and board because they just don't have staff. So, I mean, hopefully you understand that we are in a totally we're in crisis time. So if you have aging loved ones or you're the aging person listening to this webinar, you should be scared, because if you need care, it's going to be very difficult to find that from here on out. So I can't stress enough the importance of an aging plan and having those family meetings to talk about what is our plan. You know, my dad had a stroke, December 18th of last year. He didn't wake up that morning and say, I think I'm going to have a major stroke. Of course not. So you've got to be putting a plan in place and have all your grab and go binder stuff in order. When mom had her medical crisis and then 2.5 weeks later, my dad had his, I was totally freaked out. I mean, I was like the typical daughter client that I work with, but what made it manageable where I didn't crack is because I had the grab and go. So when the hospital was like, we need a state doc, we need the healthcare power of attorney, we need the living will. I'm like, here it is. We need their insurance cards. Here they are. We need their medication list. I have all that in the grab and go. So, but most families don't have any of that prepared. And that makes it even more anxiety filled when you're ill prepared like that for a medical crisis. So anyway, that's what I have for information. I know that I tend to just like throw all this content out to you, but we've got some time now for questions, and I always appreciate like thumbs up. Was this really helpful content? What did you learn today that maybe you hadn't thought about before? And are the professionals that you're working with, are they addressing these issues and talking to you about aging and end of life planning and, estate documents and stuff like that? So I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Annalie. This is awesome info. And I know I liked earlier when you said, I think I've got this. I'm good. I can do it. I think the reality is you just talked us through all the stuff we don't want to think about, but we have to think about. And I remember even years ago, I ran into a company down near us in Connecticut that does home prep for aging loved ones. So they come into your home and they eliminate all those little threshold pieces that are bumps that somebody would have to go over in a wheelchair, and they replace all the door handles. This was the funniest thing I never thought about until this, but if somebody has, arthritis in their hand and they're trying to turn one of those traditional doorknobs, it doesn't work for them. So they were saying, do those like push handles on every door. So
Yep.
Swapping all that stuff out. And these are the things we don't really think about, but that was the first thing that in my life made it occur to me that was going to be something I'd have to think about. And if I was going to care for my parents. So I think this is awesome info. My question to you, first question to you from the group here too, is how do you approach this? So a lot of our parents, I think, especially I don't know if it's just my generation and my parents, they were very private about their money. So talking about those things as far as, what do you have in place? Do you have long-term care insurance? Can I see a policy? Where are your wills? Who's the power of attorney? All of these things. How do you start this conversation with your parents?
It can be tricky because the 80 and 90-year-old and 100-year-old group, they were very private about that, right? And so when families, and this I learned a long time ago when I was still working in long-term care, and I would ask these families on these tours, does your loved one have a living will, the power of attorney in place? And the answers were always like, I don't know. We never talk about that. So one way you can leverage this webinar is saying, look, mom and dad, I was on this really informative webinar. And it made me aware that we don't talk about important things. Like I need to know some information about, like, what do you have in place? You can get the grab and go binder or create your own. I don't care, but get it done. Say, what do you have for insurance? Like, that's why I made this as user friendly as possible, because each tab in the binder works as an agenda item. So you can lead it like a meeting and not a family inquiry, right? But I can also tell you that a lot of families have tried to have these conversations and they got so much pushback from mom and dad that they quit trying. And unfortunately, now they're in crisis. And after dad had a major stroke, now he can't communicate with you, right, to tell you what you have to do. So now you have to take even more time and energy when you're already anxiety filled from a crisis and figure this out on your own. The reality is that most people don't have these family meetings because they don't want to. They don't know how to bring up sensitive topics like this. So again, that's the value of a neutral third-party family facilitator. Like that's one of the biggest blessings that I have is I can get families to open up and share information that adult kids weren't able to get because I'm not family. I'm here to put a plan together. And as financial advisors, you are in a unique position to open up the doors of communication as well. You're certainly not going to put like full aging plans in place, but at least opening up the doors of conversation and saying, I can help you with some financial conversations, but there's companies out here that actually help you facilitate full family meetings and really get things on track.
That's a great point. And yeah, as a financial advisor, it is part of our conversation with our clients. And most of the time we have their power of attorney documents at least on file with us, for my firm at least, because it does come up a lot where the kids don't know, what they know. One of them is the power of attorney, but they've never seen it in writing. So we do keep that for a lot of our clients, which gives them a little peace of mind, but not all advisors work that way either. So it's, you have to, you have to kind of find the right people to help you through that. So whether it's, your parents' advisor or somebody like yourself, Annalie, it's huge.
And it's important that, because I can't tell you again how many adult kids find out that they were named as power of attorney when they're at the hospital bed and dad had a stroke, and now the son finds out he's the financial power of attorney or the healthcare power of attorney. And again, they've never had any conversation about the what ifs and how are you supposed to make decisions for people if you've never had conversations, or you're being tasked with paying bills for someone, but you don't even know what accounts they have, what passwords they have, what banks they have. So you as families, you need to have these conversations, because otherwise your kids, they're going to pull their hair out because they don't know, they can't just find all this information easily. They end up having to take even more time off work and away from their own families to figure out what bills do they have and what kind of healthcare decisions are they supposed to be making for someone that they've never talked about it.
Yeah. And someone was asking in the chat too, at what age, the parent's age, at what age should you be really starting this conversation with them? And yeah, I was going to say now, right? I was going to say the earlier, the better. The person who wrote in was saying that their parent was 61. I will say that even with our clients, it's easier for us right now for me to talk with the 60 somethings and say, all right, can we get your power of attorney documents? Who is your healthcare directive? Who, what else do you want us to know about your family? Do we have a long-term care policy in place? Do you want us to bring your kids in for a conversation with you about all of your stuff? So we have a lot of those moments now, which it's kind of fun for them at that age because they're so young still in their minds too, that it's not as daunting. Whereas when we wait till their 70s or 80s, now you're starting to wonder, first of all, are they totally with it? Do they understand everything you're talking through? And it gets more real. And the more real it gets harder, I think. But, I'd say
right. And their decisions can change, so as an advisor, like it's your responsibility to not just have a one and done conversation, right? Like this should be a normal part of conversation when you're meeting with clients, because their conditions can change. Like my dad didn't want to be resuscitated, but now he does, and he's 83, so their minds can change, they can change their mind. Relationships change. Maybe when you first had the family meeting with your client and their kids, daughter Sally was the named power of attorney because they had a great relationship. Well, maybe they've had a falling out, and now you didn't know that because you didn't have that family meeting, and they need to update their documents if they no longer trust the person that they named.
That's right. No, it's a great point. And it is a constant conversation. And I think like even the change of wanting to be resuscitated, it's, sometimes it's like now they're living their life, they're seeing their grandkids and they're like, when they're younger, they were like, oh, I don't want to live on, machines or whatever. But now they're like, well, if I get 2 more days to see that kid, it's just a different mindset.
It's a different mindset. Yep, for sure.
So I know we talked about a lot of the doom and gloom and scary parts of having to, go through this process, but what about the plus side? Where have you seen it work well with having an aging parent in your home?
Oh yeah. And I post, if you guys follow me at all on Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff, I post all the time about aging can be a positive thing for everybody if you have an aging plan and enough supports in place, right? Just like as a financial planner, those people that have a financial plan have better outcomes financially than those without one, right? Just like an aging plan. If you want to have good outcomes, you have to have an aging plan. You have to talk about the the good, the bad, and the ugly, and put a plan in place around it. You need to know what the landscape of home care looks like right now. You need to understand what different levels of care are. And doesn't it make sense to do it when emotions aren't high, like in the midst of a crisis?
Great point. Great point. Now, earlier on, you talked a little bit about, the need for space and privacy and things like that. What kind of requirements are you thinking about in that?
Well, to make any roommate situation a desirable one, it's ideal if you all have your own bathroom.
Great.
But the problem is, I'm dead serious about this. Bathroom cleanliness, as you age, you don't see very well. So your bathroom can be messy and adult kids end up needing to clean it up. And that's where I can tell you the three things that make not living together no longer doable is obviously caregiver burnout, dementia progression, and incontinence issues. Those are the three things that families are like, yep, I've been doing this for 6 months or 5 years, whatever their story is. And I'm done because my siblings won't help me. I can't talk to them. They won't offer to help at all. And with holiday season, these primary caregivers are even full of more angst because now they're out of town and out of state. Siblings want to get together for Thanksgiving at the primary caregiver's house, which means more work, right? So that's why we had this webinar at this point, right before holiday season, to be prepared.
I think that's a great idea. I know we talked about it before the call too, but that it is the time that you see the bigger signs really easily. So it is a good time to have the conversation. From a financial side, I know we were talking a little bit about, what's in place to help with the care, and some of the things we go through that, some of the listeners might want to think about is just, talking to your parents about, do they, is their home fully paid off? So is there value there? So can you use some of that if they run out of money in other accounts? Do they have investment accounts? Do they have a long-term care policy, or like you said, a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider on it? And, I do think that POA, having the power of attorney, knowing who the power of attorney is for each parent, because it could be different for each parent too.
Right.
They might name one of each sibling, you just never know.
Yeah.
Just to have that information up front is I'd say those are some of the biggest things to find out early on, so that you have some of the pieces that'll help make that possible later on.
That's right. And to answer the question about, when is the time, in seriousness, I'm saying now. I don't care how old you are. There's no like magic age that you have to wait until there's a plan. Like, I'll be 50 next year, and I'm a national speaker, and I had made it through China somehow without getting killed by, my own non-traveling experience. But then I'm in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and I'm walking across the street as a pedestrian. I'm walking with a little 82-year-old gentleman who was telling me all about his health issues. And all of a sudden he yells, "Watch out." This is 4 days after my 40th birthday. School bus driver with 29 kids on the bus was totally distracted. She blew through the intersection. She didn't apply the brakes until she saw my face break the headlight of the bus. I flew 15 feet. So my point is, I didn't wake up on May 3rd of 2012 going, I think I'm going to get hit by a school bus and be, laid up for a year. Right. And that's one of the reasons I went virtual, because I couldn't drive. I couldn't go anywhere. So I converted over to virtual. Plus that was the profile of typical families anyway. But like, if I didn't have my grab and go binder done and I would have lost consciousness or died, I have 3 businesses. My family wouldn't have a clue how to close down my businesses or my client roster list or who I use for payroll processing or my corporate attorney. Like, they would have no clue. And what a terrible thing to do to your family is leave them that ill prepared. Like, that's terrible to do that.
That's a crazy story and scary story. You don't know when it's coming, which is, that's terrifying.
It is terrifying, but again, I practice what I preach. I carry my living will, and I carry my healthcare power of attorney with me everywhere I go. I always have, because I do crisis management for a living. So I know what happens when people don't have the mindset of planning ahead. Don't expect good outcomes if you're not willing to put a plan together.
Now, what about so if you're in a position, mom, I'm not there yet with my parents, but I'm well versed in it, obviously, from what we do. But what's the first step for people that kind of don't see this in the day to day? What's the sort of first step? Like, let's say your loved ones moved in with you, and they, are starting to show signs that maybe they need some extra help, and you have a full-time job, you're going to work every day, but mom and dad are still at home, or maybe one parent's still at home. You're worried that they're going to walk out of the house and not know where they are, or things like that. So aside from like alarm systems and things to that nature, at one point, like, who do you reach out to first as far as getting that sort of live-in help, somebody to come just do a little daycare kind of situation?
Yeah, well, and that's the value of the aging plan is we talk about what's working well, what's not working well, what are the goals? Are the goals to bring in home care? And if so, what's the budget? Because with the pandemic, home care used to cost $20 to $25 an hour, but now they bump it up to $30 to $40 an hour because that's the only way to retain some caregivers is to boost up their pay, right? So that's what I'm saying is now is a time more than ever that we have to have these conversations about planning so that in that scenario that you gave, what is their budget? If they only have $16,000 to their name, that's not going to get them very far with home care at $30 an hour and they all have a 5 to 8 hour shift minimum right now. So the more that families are educated, the better decisions they can make, right? So again, leverage, if you're on this webinar or listening to it as a podcast, leverage this and say, you know what, mom and dad, we need to talk about some things that we tend to shy away from. And I'd like to learn more about what you have in place. Or like I said before, do the grab and go binder and do it as a family event. Mom and dad, I'm getting my affairs in order. I'd like to know what you have in order. And let's do this as a project together. Let's make sure we have our estate documents in order. Let's talk about these things. What do we have for accounts and passwords and assets? And I added storage units to the grab and go binder because this mom and dad had a storage unit full of antiques and collectible art. Kids didn't even know about it. That's why there's value in having a family meeting where we have a process. We have 25 bullet points that we talk about through the course of these family meetings just to make sure everything's buttoned up.
Well, folks, we could go on and on, but we need to end. I want to thank both Annalee and Robin for being here today. And I want to thank the organizations that have made this webinar possible. To our attendees, we did have a request for a replay of this event. We will be hosting that with replay on our website. And if you have registered, we will also send you a link to that replay, and you're welcome to send that to friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial who's a great fit for you, your life, your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks to those of you who have participated in the chat. We've had lots of activity there. We appreciate you very much. See you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.